Welcome back. You're still with Perspective, and we're talking to Phelim Kine from Human Rights Watch. Whatever President Jokowi, for example, even with his best intention, sometimes, like I said, there's public pressure, and there's also a lot of other factors. We count the parliament, where he hasn't got any majority, you've got the military, and so on. What sort of time frame would you give him to be able to overcome these obstacles? Would he be able to do it in 2 years' time, for example? Do you think so?
It's early days, and again, it's the first 100 days, and we are the first to recognize that the changes that he needs to make in terms of key issues are going to take some time. But having said that, there are some issues that he can address that don't take changes in policy, don't require Parliament behind him, that he can very quickly act on and have a huge impact on human rights in Indonesia. Let me give you an example. He can open up Papua to foreign journalists and international organizations.
But that still would receive opposition from some segment of the society.
I'm not saying it would be easy, but it's something that he could act on as the chief executive. The second thing is, Human Rights Watch has published research showing that women who apply to the police and to the military are subject to these so-called virginity tests, which are absolutely junk science, abusive.
I concur entirely.
Now, we have published research on this in the last couple of months, and we have been advocating with the Indonesian government to put an end to this. Now, all this requires is for President Widodo to send an order down to the military and to the police to say, this is unacceptable, stop it.
But is it really going on? I mean, in some region, yes, but it's not general?
We interviewed a large number of women who have been victimized with this virginity test, going back decades, going back many decades. This has been going on for a long time, and it's been tolerated. And the fact is that in the interviews that we did, the research shows that women are tired of this. They recognize that it's abusive, it's unacceptable, and they want their government to stop this, to protect them from this type of abuse. Women shouldn't have to be physically violated in order to serve their country, either in the military or the police. And that's something that President Widodo could change tomorrow. He just sends the order.
Any other fields that he can do as well? That's easy.
Sure. The other issue is, religious sectarianism is a huge problem in Indonesia. It's a problem that's been getting worse over the 10 years of SBY's presidency. And one of the basic problems is that religious minorities are not protected by the police, that Indonesian police fail in their fundamental obligation to protect the public and to enforce the law. So what that means is, President Widodo needs to send the word out to the police that when religious minorities are victimized, the police investigate, the perpetrators are arrested, and that they are prosecuted. Right now, religious minorities, when they're victimized, no one is ever arrested. There's no penalty to pay. So people do it because they can get away with it. This is something that the president can act on very quickly. Also, there are outstanding Supreme Court orders that order the churches to allow to be built or to be open. This is the order of the highest court in the land, and they're being completely ignored. This is something the president could come in and say, hey, those religious minorities and their places of worship, they have been given permission by the Supreme Court, allow them to operate. End of story. These are things that can be done in a very short period. It's not rocket science. It doesn't require convincing Parliament of anything, but it could have huge impact on huge numbers of people inside Indonesia.
Talking about factors that usually can stand in the way, we're also talking about the military for Papua, for example. In terms of Indonesia nowadays, present Indonesia, a lot of people have been saying that the military actually have retired back from politics, withdrawn themselves a bit. Do you agree with this, or are they still very influential in politics in determining human rights issues, for example?
You know, from Human Rights Watch's perspective, you know, our observation and research of the military is not so much in terms of their political influence, but in the fact that in many areas in Indonesia, and particularly Papua, they operate essentially with the freedom to victimize people without any type of redress. And you know, this is the situation that the president needs to confront, in the sense that security forces are able to commit human rights abuses and almost 100% of the time get away with it. So you know, this is something that is a huge problem in terms of human rights and the military's relationship with the government. And it's something that President Widodo really needs to get control of. Is there going to be an overnight solution to this? No. But first he needs to identify it and take steps toward addressing this issue.
But he is aware of the issues, because he is, like you say, they have said it before. It's not a question of he doesn't know about it, he knows about it. It's just the will, you think. That
exactly. These problems, you've got exactly, these problems are well documented, they're well known. What it requires is the political will in tackling them and bringing them to an end.
Right. What about, let's talk about religious.
Yeah.
The minorities, for example. It is, sometimes we can understand that at the higher level you can issue order, you can issue to the commander, to the police chief, whatever. But when it comes down to the ground level, to the grassroots, to the operatives, there's already what you call parti pris. They've already taken a position as to, well, they're not Muslim, or they're deviant Muslims. How do you deal with that?
Well, it's more, I would say the situation is more complicated than that, and in a sense, it's more worrying. So it's not so much that the order comes down from the top and then it's ignored. What we have documented in multiple locations throughout the years is that you have security forces and government officials who actively cooperate with the victimization of Ahmadiyya. Passive and active. You know, when we've had, I think the most infamous case, of course, was the Chikusuk case, where you had police on the scene who did nothing to intervene, and people died. And I think this is probably the more worrying issue. It's not, I think it's too easy to say, oh, it's because of decentralization and, you know, the order comes down. You know, the fact is that there are elements of the government and the security forces who are actively involved in these abuses. And that's something...
And acting against the law.
And acting against the law. They're not just shrugging, they're raising their fists. And this is something that should be of huge concern for government, which rule of law, you know, filters down to everything, whether you're talking about corruption, whether you're talking about allocation of resources, when you're talking about, you know, development issues.
But you will be talking about change of mindset completely at the bottom level, for example. It's not a question of a year, it's a question of 5, 10 years, 20 years even.
Their education is part of it, but the other issue is that people who have been implicated in victimizing religious minorities, whether they're government officials, whether they're FPI, whether they are police.
They should go to court first.
They need to be arrested. They need to be arrested and prosecuted. That's not rocket science, and that doesn't take a lot of effort. Surely education is part of it, but what the fact is when you have elements of the government security forces actively victimizing religious minorities, that's when you have to say, these people must be stopped, arrested, and prosecuted. People have to know that there's a price to be paid for victimizing religious minorities. Right now, there's no price to be paid, so it happens all the time.
What does it need? A presidential order? A decree for that?
You know, the president of Indonesia has a lot of tools in the toolbox, and you know, we leave it to him in terms of finding the best levers. You know, what we're saying is, here's the issue, here's your obligation, do something. The previous president failed miserably at doing that. So the challenge for President Widodo is acting on the failure of his predecessor and doing a better job.
You think he will be able to do that?
This is early days for President Widodo.
It's early days, but he has a predisposition. Do you think that there is actually a way?
Absolutely. You know, we're very optimistic about this president, and we believe that you know, if he gets the right advice, if he listens to
the right voices,
if he prioritizes the human rights of his people, then good things are going to happen. And there's time for that to happen.
Let's talk about another side of religion, like the extremism of not the one against the minorities, but the radicalism itself. I thought we all say ISIS and things like that. But, I mean, Indonesia, it's been there for a while. It's been, and a lot of the Densus, the anti-terrorist movement, detachment that has been dealing with it, has come under a lot of criticism for its harsh treatment of this. Do you agree with that, or is there? I personally think you must have a degree of harshness to deal with them, because it's not a regular threat. Do you agree with that, or is there another way to do it?
Let me put it this way. You know, this issue of religious extremism is now a global problem.
Yeah,
it's not just Indonesia. Indonesia has a lot of experience with the violent effects of it. It also has a lot of experience in terms of dealing with it, both in terms of a police issue, but also in terms of education. And what I think you can see from past experiences, the worst thing to do is to allow a very heavy-handed, abusive security force response to what is religious extremism, because in the end what happens is you create more abuses, you alienate more people,
it's a cycle.
And it's a vicious cycle.
Okay.
And this is an overarching theme of our World Report this year.
Okay. Can we continue on that interesting point after the break?
Sure.
We'll be back. Please don't move.